Welcome to the Childfree Wealth Podcast, hosted by Bri and Dr. J, Certified Financial Planner. Here we discuss life and finances as it relates to being child-free. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Please consult your advisor before implementing any ideas heard on this podcast.
So if you've listened to our podcast for a while, you've probably heard us talk about FILE, to live early, as an alternative to retirement. And really what we're talking about is the question of, are you ever going to work again or not? And there are some people that actually want to retire. And it's kind of funny, like looking through our list of podcasts and content map and all that we have, we're like, we haven't talked about what happens if you truly just want to retire and you don't want to do a FILE or do something back. And so we're going to dive into, how do you retire as a child-free person? So Bri, kind of what jumps to mind for you?
I like thinking about traditional retirement in the sense of it might not be something that's your first choice. Might not be a lot of people's first choice listening to this, but there is potential that you might be forced into retirement one day. I was having a conversation with somebody recently, and it was a couple, and ironically, he's a financial planner. He's still working, but she worked in events and did all these things, and she said, I was eventually just forced into retirement because of the pandemic and everything happening. So I had to retire. I didn't really want to, but I didn't have a choice because we couldn't keep running like we were running. And with all the health issues because of it, it was the best choice to just shut it down. And I didn't think about that before of, well, you might actually just be forced to retire one day, whether or not you want to. And that's something to consider as well.
Yeah, there's a good chance for many of us that at some point our physical, mental health will get to a point where like, yeah, you got to retire, Now, I don't know, I'm not sure I'm ready for that day, but there are others that want to retire, which is like, I want to just never work again. And that's fine. I think my challenge to folks is you need to know what you want to retire to, not what you want to retire from. So it's pretty obvious, like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do the job I've been doing. I don't want to do that. Great. Well, what do you want to do? Because if you look at retirement, you look at the data on it, it's actually not that great. The data says if you retire, in particular for men, when you retire, you lose a lot of your sense of identity because your job was your identity, and happiness in retirement goes down pretty considerably. For women, it goes down also, but for men, it goes down and stays down. For women, they tend to have a little bit better of a kind of a bounce back of like, oh, now I figured out what I want to do. Men, if you have not figured out that plan, it's kind of like, I was always X. I am no longer X. What am I? And it is an issue because you don't have a target of kind of what is your purpose? What do you want to do? What do you want to spend your time? Like, what do you want to do with your retirement? And it's perfectly fine if your retirement is to spend the time on the beach and my new identity is being a beach bum. If that's what you want to do, if that's what your heart says, which is different than being forced into being a beach bum.
Absolutely. And finding what you want to do, I think, is so incredibly important. And you might not know exactly what you want to do in retirement, but you can try a whole lot of different things, and some might stick and some might not, and that's okay. But thinking about how you might use that time, some of the things you want to try, oftentimes I will encourage clients if they're saying, I had somebody who said their pink sticky note, which was their retirement dreams, involved a lot of pickleball. And I said, okay, that's great. How about you start playing pickleball now? You don't have to wait till retirement to do these things. You can also do some of these things and enjoy them now and spend your time doing that. And maybe you get to retirement age and you go, pickleball is not something I want to do. Haven't really heard that from a lot of people at retirement age because pickleball is the hot new thing. But it might be just trying those things now, seeing if they fit you and trying out lots of different things.
Yeah, and I've actually heard some folks taking trial retirements. So they take a month, 2 months, maybe even 3 months off of work, unpaid even, and go and live the retirement life for a little bit and see if that's what they like. And that works perfectly fine. And the reason why I talk about what you want to retire to is that's going to determine what life you're living and what your expenses are and what the math is. Remember, part of retirement is you can retire when you have enough money to pay your bills. It's not about age. Age is actually one of the least interesting things about your retirement plan. Age will tell me how long you're in retirement, But like, it's not like you hit 65 and you can retire, or hit 65 and you must retire. Whatever magic age is in your head, the actual math about can you retire is, do I have enough money to pay for my expenses for the remainder of my life and die with zero if that's your goal is, or die with whatever your goal is. And that's a math equation, but you need to know what is your retirement life going to look like before you can decide, can you retire?
Hey, Childfree Wealth listeners, it's Bri. I highly encourage you to schedule a Childfree Wealth checkup. During this time, you're going to get a couple of forms to fill out that include your life and financial plan. We'll review them, and then we're going to have a meeting and go through them with you. We're going to give you some advice and things to work on and talk through things to make your finances simpler so your life can be amazing. You can schedule yours by going to our website, childfreewealth.com, and clicking the Schedule Now button. Yeah. And we've talked about before, sometimes in retirement, your expenses will go down because you won't be spending on certain things. But in what ways might they go up as well? What might you be spending more on? Are there things that you want to do that cost a bit of money and you need to plan for those expenses? So knowing those, not just what expenses are going to go down or what your expenses are now, but how do you want to spend your money in retirement? What are those activities cost? And adding that in so you get to retirement, you can actually enjoy a really fulfilling retirement and not feel strapped for cash. Because I've seen many people who go into retirement and who are afraid to spend any money on anything. And that's kind of a sad point for me to see, to go have a conversation with somebody and they're so worried about spending money, even though they're financially okay, but they just don't feel comfortable in it. So I like to say, look at the things that you might want to do, anticipate about how much you want to spend on them or what the actual cost of them is, and then plan that in when you're going for retirement, because it might make spending that money easier.
Yeah. And I'm a big fan of this approach called the retirement smile. So you tend to actually spend more money at the beginning of your retirement. That's when you're going through your bucket list. Like, hey, I got to travel. I got to do this. I got to buy the car. I got to do whatever I got to do. And then you end up spending less over kind of the middle of your retirement. And then you spend more at the end, which is about long-term care. And I had a reporter ask kind of like, what's the biggest mistake people do in retirement? And my answer was, they don't plan for long-term care. Like, that is part of your plan. Like, you're like, oh, I've got my expenses. I spend $50K a year. I'm like, great. And then when your retirement, which is 20 years down the road, and your long-term care is now hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, like, oh, I didn't have a plan for that. Like, you need to have a plan, because it's not only that extra you're spending in the beginning, but it's that extra you're spending at the end. And that's that balancing act in between. You don't want to, as Bri was saying, be kind of running scared and like, I can't spend any money. I can't enjoy my retirement because I'm going to run out. Like, you need to have a plan that matches you.
And knowing where that money's going to come from, I think when it comes to retirement, we'll see people who say, I don't want to plan for long-term care. And I think that works to a point, but you also need to be conscious of where you're at as well, because what your ideal plan for long-term care is and the reality of it, you might want the opt-out option. And if you want the opt-out option, I'd say I'm honestly more on that path too. But I also recognize that it's not available every place. And the fallback is, if you don't plan to have money, you might end up in a place where you don't really want to be in because your first option wasn't available as well. So being aware of that and knowing what your local laws are and what that looks like, and then adding that backup plan in there is always a good idea too.
Yep. So when our clients want to die with zero and want to retire, we set what we call a die with zero safety net, which is a plan for long-term care, which is either cash aside, insurance, something along those lines, putting off Social Security till 70, and then some cash cushion. A year or two expenses. Because like, we don't literally want you dying with zero and like living on the street eating cat food. I don't know why it's always eating cat food, but that's what everybody has in their mind. I guess cat food's tastier than dog food. I don't know. But we don't want that. But then what we do is we optimize for how much money can you spend across. And when you hear people talk about retirement, they talk about the safe withdrawal rate, which is 4%. And that's a old school kind of way of looking at it. It's a math equation. And the equation is, how long can I go, about over 30 years, how much money can I take out and safely have very little or no chance of running out of money? So by the way, that has built into it an assumption that may not match you, because assuming you want more money. And that 4% rule is called the safe withdrawal rate, but people call it a rule, it's not really a rule. It's a guideline. What we'll do with clients is we'll actually run Monte Carlo simulations, which is 1,000 simulations from the market's better than ever, then worse than ever. And we'll see, okay, if you spend this much, there's a chance you run out of money. And work goal is actually about 50-50 chance you'll run out of money. Because if we're constantly making that adjustment over time, you'll do fine. So I can't even tell you, is it a 4%? Is it a 5%? Is it 6? Like, who knows? It depends. But the 4% rule is a good place to start. Now, the inverse of the 4% rule is, hey, if I have my expenses, let's say it's $40,000 a year, if I multiply that by 25, that'll tell you about how much you need to have in retirement to meet that safe withdrawal rate, which is about $1 million in this case. The downside of that is it doesn't match your life, doesn't match, die with zero, all that, but it's a rough guess. So if you've already had enough money for the 4% rule, you have enough money to take out more and enjoy your life.
And another downfall of the 4% rule and 25 times your expenses that we often talk about, another downfall of the 4% rule or 25 times your expenses, which may not match you, is it doesn't necessarily take into account the cost of long-term care. In 2025, the average cost of long-term care is $125,000 per year, and it can be higher or lower depending on where you are. So if you're not spending that $127,000 a year, your expenses are lower than that. You might be planning for something without planning for the cost of long-term care. So making sure you take all those factors into account and then really building a personalized plan for you. We often encourage, if you're going to do Die with Zero, you need to be planning ongoing basis for this. This is not a one and done thing. It should never be a one and done thing because it needs a constant adjustment and paying attention and making sure, are you still on track? Do you need to spend a little bit more this year? Do you need to spend a little bit less? It's not I can set my plan and call it done.
Yep. And with a rough estimate on expenses and a rough estimate on safe withdrawal. By the way, I say rough because Bill Bengen just put out a new book and he's now calling it 4.7%. I don't know. The number keeps changing. But with that rough number, then you got to work on a plan. And interestingly enough, for a lot of folks, it's a huge shift to go from I've been saving money all across my life to spending money. It's a huge mental shift to say, I'm going to start spending down my money because that's just not what you're trained to. And people go, well, I can't get access to my money until I'm 59 and a half. We have a whole separate episode. We'll link to it on how to get access to your money before 59 and a half. There's a lot of ways. But the challenge is you have to make a plan that's going to make sense for you across the rest of your life that takes into account taxes. So investing can be very, very simple. We're big fans of simple, passive, long-term investing. That's simple. How do you take that money out in the right amounts each year across your life and pay the least amount of taxes is hard. And if you don't have a good tax plan, you can actually pay more money in retirement than you ever paid during your working years.
Hey, Childfree Wealth listeners, it's Bri. If you haven't already signed up for our newsletter, be sure to get on it, where each week we send out information regarding what's going on in the world of child-free life and finances. You can sign up by finding the link in our description. Yeah, that can be tough. Sometimes I'll say, I need you to spend more money. And they'll go, well, I don't really need to spend that. And then I'll go and show them their tax projections. And I say, okay, if you don't want to spend it, then you're going to be spending it on Uncle Sam because you're going to get hit with some heavy RMDs in the future here. And then suddenly it's, okay, I can spend that money, which is kind of just a fun shift to see in people.
Or give it away.
Yeah.
When I say spend, I don't mean literally spend. You can do whatever you want with your money, but you need to have a plan because what happens is Bri mentioned RMDs, which are required minimum distributions. At some point, it's your mid-70s for most folks, the government's going to say you have to take a certain amount out of your IRAs, your 401ks, your traditional accounts every year, whether you want it or not. And that's so they get their tax money. That is the whole reason for it. Well, instead, if you've set up a good retirement plan, you may actually pay more taxes some years in order to pay less in the end. This is where we can do things like Roth conversions or pull money out, or we can actually, kind of look at it and say, all right, we'll pull out of this account instead of that account. It's a combination of do I want to pay capital gains? Do I want to pay income tax? When do I want to pay it? Because the other thing that happens is once you get over 65, you start paying IRMA surcharges, which are extra Medicare payments just for the hell of it.
Oh, IRMA surcharges make me laugh because people hate them and will go on just absolute avoidance of them at any point in time. Sometimes it's okay to pay the IRMA surcharge if it means using money to enjoy your life.
Yeah, I mean, let's be real. If you're paying IRMA surcharges, you're paying extra taxes, that's because you have more money. And IRMA surcharges, I don't know, a couple $100 a month for most folks. And that couple $100 drives people batty because they're like, why am I paying this? I'm like, because you made a lot of money. Like, just,
Pat yourself on the back. You did a good job.
it's the penalty, but that's part of a plan. And this is one of those areas like the investing side, you could probably do alone. The tax planning side, you need to work with a professional on. And that's where, when you're looking at retirement, looking at it and say, all right, this is my plan for the next 20 years. You're making a lot of assumptions. I'll be real. I don't know what tax law is going to be in 20 years, but we make assumptions based on today. We make assumptions based on your spending, on your giving, but we're making a strategy for it. And one of the things that people get caught up on is, well, what about healthcare? I can't retire until I'm 65 because then I get Medicare. I'm like, oh, no. Like, you can retire well before that. We can get you on an ACA plan. And if you're retired, your income's low, you might even get a tax break on it. There are ways to cover healthcare in retirement without waiting for Medicare.
Yeah. And sometimes I'll look at healthcare plans and go, you have a crappy plan through your employer anyway. The plan you can get on the ACA is better, and it's probably going to cost you less if you don't have any income coming in. So don't let healthcare be the reason you stay in a job until you're 65. I think that can be something that people hang on to for far too long, it was what it was designed to do in the first place. But it doesn't need to be your reason to keep working.
Yeah. So kind of rough number for healthcare, kind of back of the napkin math I use. For a couple, it's about 25 grand a year if you have to like use it all. Like, you're talking about like, the deductible and all that fun stuff. So 12 and a half or so for a soloist. And really what I'm going is, all right, for 25 grand a year, you're willing to stay in this miserable job and not retire? And they're like, no. I'm like, okay, cool. Let's work on the plan and let's make it happen. But it's this like boogeyman about like, oh, I'm going to have terrible healthcare. Like, no, I'm talking about like the gold and platinum plans in the ACA, which are good coverage, and you can get it and be done with it, and you can go enjoy your retirement. I think, whatever barrier you think is there for retirement, the question is it real or not? And what I tend to find with child-free folks, if they truly want to retire, they probably could have retired a while ago, but their mind is set on a number. Like, I need to hit X. And for some reason, it's always $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, whatever, some millions. And I'm like, says who? And they're like, well, I read this article, or like, I did this math on a save withdrawal rate. And I'm like, okay, I will do the math and we'll go on their expenses. We'll do the whole retirement smile, long-term care. We'll run these things. And I'm like, you're dying with $100 million. And they're like, how's that possible? And I show them the math, and usually it takes a couple of months, like working with clients, about 6 months before they believe me. And I'm like, you hit your number a while ago. They're like, but I needed this. And I'm like, hold up. Like, that's a magic number. That doesn't mean it's real. And there are some times where, you know what? I'm just going to retire. I'm going to move somewhere cheaper. I got a lot of folks moving out of the country right now. I'm going to move to Costa Rica, where cost of living is a whole lot less, and enjoy my life. Awesome. Well, you don't need to hit the millions of dollars. Like, it's not like if you hit X millions that magically your retirement is set. It's not. Like, you can retire on $1 million. Well, you can retire on 10 million and be broke. Like, it depends on the lifestyle you're trying to live.
Exactly. And it's knowing your lifestyle and what it wants to look like. I have seen multiple things online of 2 million is not enough to retire, 5 million is not enough to retire, 10 million is not enough to retire. And it drives me nuts because that's not necessarily true. You can live an amazing life and have plenty of money with $2 million. You can also live an amazing life and go, $2 million isn't enough. But it's fitting you, your life, not general rules that are out there floating around online. And that's why I'm such a big fan of actually having a conversation, figuring out what it looks like for you and what you want those projections to look like instead of blindly following rules of thumb.
And by the way, it doesn't even have to be millions. I did a plan for somebody who was in her 20s, late 20s, and had $500,000 saved up for a variety of reasons, was going to go live somewhere really cheap cost of living, and it would work, which just breaks people's brains. Now, if we're talking about retirement, you got to talk about Social Security. And we tend to say put off Social Security to the end. And the reason for that, it's part of a safety net for long-term care, for end of life, for dying with zero. But if you've read the news recently, they just came out again. They're like, hey, by 2033 now, it's going to run out. I'm of the thought, look, if you are Gen X, Gen Y, discount whatever you think you're going to get from Social Security by about 25%. That's kind of a rough estimate because that's what they're saying. They're saying, hey, kind of 2033, 2035, we'll have to, give out 75% of what it is. The odds that they change the amount of money that people are getting when they're currently receiving, so that's like boomers that are already receiving it, very low. And remember, with Social Security, you don't have an account with your name on it. Your money that you paid in was already paid out to others. And this is where folks will tell me child-free folks are destroying Social Security because we're not having kids. Well, Social Security is destroying itself. Like, we're just a symptom of it. But like, it is realistic to say, I'm going to discount it. I will also say at the same time, I don't count on it. If you're saying, hey, my entire retirement is based on Social Security, I'm like, that's not a plan.
Not at all. And I think it's also fair to say if you're younger than Gen X or Gen Y and you're just going, I don't want to count Social Security at all. That's fine. I personally don't count any Social Security. Whatever I receive, if it still is around at that time, cherry on top. But it's okay to take and adjust those things. And if you haven't figured it out, I tend to have a very individualistic of like, I need to protect myself sort of mindset with certain things. And I've seen that a lot in clients too, who go, I want to make sure I'm good. I don't want to necessarily have to count on these things, which is what we're saying of don't count on Social Security to be your entire retirement. Hey listeners, like what you're hearing? Don't miss a thing. Sign up for the Childfree Wealth newsletter for weekly tips, tools, and podcast updates. Head to childfreewealth.com/newsletter to get on the list.
Yeah, and it's interesting. The Gen X is the first generation that had just the 401k. Before that, there were pensions and other things. And there's very rarely a pension now. It's usually government work or academia, something like that. But I'm Gen X, and we're the first generation to play with 401ks. And it's a huge experiment, and I don't know if it's going to work out. I just don't. And what's going to happen then for Gen Y and younger? I have no clue. I just don't. But what I can tell you is the math. The math is I need to know how much my expenses are. I need to know if I have enough money to cover it. When I do, I can retire. It's not like, hey, I need to do this. I need to get this age. I need to do that. You can do this. Now, it's all based on quality of life. And what I want for my life and what Bri wants might be two different things, and that's okay. Because the answer is whatever you put into retirement is what you get back out. And it's about having a good plan so that the government doesn't get it, so that, you get to use it, so you get to enjoy it. Now, I will talk about, because it's very popular right now, a lot of folks want to retire overseas. If you want to retire overseas, you just made your tax hassles a lot harder. Cost of living, I can't argue, okay? Like, there's a lot of places a whole lot cheaper than the U.S. But you need to work with what's called a cross-border CPA, somebody that knows the U.S. and whatever country you're going to, U.S. and Portugal, if that's where you're going, or whatever else it is. And you have to have a plan because you can get some rude awakening. Like, one of the common ones is, a lot of countries will tax your retirement earnings, including your Roth. And you're like, oh, I got a Roth IRA, so I don't pay tax on it ever again. You're correct. You don't pay tax on it ever again to the U.S. But, I go to a different country, it might. Like, you need to do some serious tax planning. And if the only thing you take out of this is that you need to have a plan of where you're going and you need to figure out your taxes, that kind of is the message. I mean, Bri, what are you seeing on the countries? Because, I see people all the time like, I'm going to go do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, great. And then I show them the mechanics and they're like, oh, that's a lot of work.
It is true. And I think if you're going to move abroad, seriously, you do need to have a plan and work through it because it's not something where you can just pick up and go easily. Well, the thought of it is nice. It can be really, really hard to do that. And those tax surprises may not be fun.
Yeah, and I've even gone to a place with some of my clients where they keep their residency in the United States, and then they do a lot of international travel, which gets you kind of the lifestyle a little bit, but gets you out of the citizenship issues and the tax issues and all that. Because remember, as a U.S. citizen, you're taxing your worldwide earnings. Doesn't matter where you're at. But what ends up happening is you can retire if that's your goal. And I want you to have a plan before you're forced to retire. Okay, cool. I want to do X until Y. whatever that is. And I think the challenge is you just need to start planning on that now and be realistic about it. For most of the folks I've done checkups for, when they want to truly retire, they've already had enough money before they come to us. It's just kind of how that works, which really means they could have retired before that. You might be able to do that. If you question, grab a checkup. We can walk you through it and go, all right, here's what you need, and here's how you do it. Don't be surprised if you're closer than you thought you were.
If you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving a rating or review. We'd love to keep the conversation going. Please let us know your thoughts wherever comments are available or email us at media@childfreewealth.com. To stay up to date, find and follow Childfree Wealth on social media. If you're interested in working with us, learn more by visiting our website, childfreewealth.com. We'll see you next time.